Listen to Dracula by Bram Stoker. Part 3. Level 2. Check out Part 2 here.
14. Late at night, Mina lay in bed. She couldn't sleep because of Renfield. He cried and shouted and fought with the guards. Then sleep finally took her over, but she was half awake. She saw white, thick fog. It slowly filled the room. Then it turned into a tall, thin figure of a man. He stood over Mina's bed. She saw a pale face with thin features. It is just a dream, she thought, and lost her senses. In the morning, Jonathan woke her up, but she remembered nothing. Several days passed. One night, the men heard a terrible cry coming from Renfield's room. They found him on the floor, face down in a pool of blood. Van Helsing ran to him and turned him over. His whole face was covered in blood. "He came to me. He spoke to me often," Renfield said in a low, quiet voice. "I saw Lady Mina today. She was pale and unhealthy. He is taking her life. He is drinking her blood. I wanted to fight him, but his terrible red eyes burned me, and my power left me." His voice grew weaker and weaker. Then Renfield was quiet. He was dead. "The worst thing has happened," Van Helsing said. "Quick, to the Harker's room." They ran down the hall. The door to the room was locked. They broke it open and ran inside. A terrible scene waited for them there. Jonathan lay on the bed. He couldn't move. Mina knelt by the bed. Above her stood Dracula, holding her head against the cut on his chest. She was drinking his blood. The vampire saw the men and shouted loudly. He pushed Mina aside and moved toward Van Helsing. But the professor raised his cross high above his head. Dracula jumped back and turned into a fog and disappeared. Then Jonathan came to his senses. "What happened?" he asked. Then he looked at his wife and let out a cry. Mina was sitting on the floor. Her face and shirt were covered in blood. She cried loudly. "Dear Mina, you are in a lot of pain and fear right now. But please, tell us what happened," Van Helsing said. Mina was quiet for a moment. Then she began her story. "I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a white fog. It slowly filled the room. I was scared and tried to wake Jonathan, but he wasn't moving. Suddenly, a terrible figure appeared by my side. I immediately recognized Count Dracula. He told me, 'If you shout, I will kill your husband right in front of you.' He put his sharp teeth against my neck and drank my blood. Then he cut his chest open and said, 'You help these awful men. They wish to catch me and destroy me. Me, who has ruled countries for centuries. I will make you mine. You will belong to my kind.' With these words, he held my head against his chest and made me drink his blood. Ah, what am I now? What have I done?" She covered her face with her hands. "We have to deal with the rest of the boxes," Van Helsing said. "Dear Mina, we will leave now. The cross will protect you." He held out the cross and touched her face with it. The cross burned Mina's skin and left a terrible mark on it. She shouted and turned her face away. "I am unclean," she cried. "Oh, God, save me!"
Send this video to your friends if they like reading books, too.
15. The men went to the second house of Dracula and found 20 wooden boxes. They put crosses in each box and closed them. Now only one box was missing. "Our business is not over until we find the last one," Van Helsing said. Some time later they heard a noise. Someone was carefully opening the lock of the door. "It is Dracula," Van Helsing said. "He has come to protect his boxes. Prepare to attack." The men hid behind the door. When the Count entered the room, they attacked him from behind. But the Count was quick. He escaped their every attack. Dr. Seward held out a cross. The Count jumped back to the wall. His eyes burned with red fire. Suddenly, Dracula jumped out of the window. He ran down the alley toward the gate and shouted, "You think you are following me, but I am the one following you. I have taken the lives of your women, and I will take your lives too." And then he disappeared. "He is afraid of us," Van Helsing cried. "Sooner or later we will catch the Count and destroy him. And now, let us return to Lady Mina." Mina was waiting for them. "Professor," she cried excitedly when they entered her room, "I have an idea. You should hypnotize me before sunrise. I might be able to tell you something about the Count," she suggested. "Let us try at once," he replied. When Mina fell asleep, Van Helsing asked her, "Where are you?" She answered in a quiet voice, "I can hear the waves and the ringing of chains." "Are you on a ship?" Van Helsing asked. "What are you doing?" "I am lying," she said slowly. "It is very dark. I am in a coffin." Van Helsing put his hands on Mina's shoulders and laid her head on a pillow. "There is not a minute to lose," he said. "Dracula is going back to Transylvania. We must follow him and destroy him. If we don't do so, Mina will turn into a vampire. We will lose her forever." Then he suggested a plan. "We will travel by land and reach Transylvania before Dracula. We only have one night to prepare," Van Helsing explained. Mina woke up and spoke suddenly. "Wait, I have one more request," she said. "What is it?" Van Helsing asked. "I have thought about it a lot," she began in a quiet voice. "I trust you all because you are my closest friends. When you notice that I change like Lucy—" For a moment, Mina couldn't speak. Then she continued. "When you realize that it is better for me to die than to live, when I become a vampire, please kill me at once." She covered her face with her hands and cried. Quincy was the first to speak. "If the moment comes, I will help you," he promised. "So will I," Van Helsing said. Arthur and Dr. Seward gave their word too. "Do you expect your husband to promise it as well?" Jonathan asked. "Yes, dear," Mina said. "If I have to die, let the man I love the most take my life."
Hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to get more audiobooks like this.
16. The group makes its way to Transylvania. Mina grows weaker every day. It becomes more and more difficult to hypnotize her. However, they learn from her dreams that Dracula's box is now in Transylvania. The group breaks up into 3. Arthur and Jonathan go in a boat down the Surrey River. Quincy and Dr. Seward ride on horseback. Van Helsing and Mina take the train and then ride a carriage to a mountain pass. Dracula's castle is found on the other side of the pass. Mina has changed a lot. She is turning into a vampire. Mina and Van Helsing went on foot to Dracula's castle. It was a long journey. One night, Van Helsing couldn't wake Mina from her long sleep. "We have no time left. Dracula almost has her under control," Van Helsing thought. It was November, and there was snow in the mountains. The professor took Mina closer to the fire to keep her warm. He noticed that she was shaking. He drew a circle around her and put 4 crosses on it. Suddenly he heard voices. 3 female figures appeared out of the white fog. They held out their arms toward Mina and laughed. Van Helsing understood that they were vampires. They came closer, but they didn't enter the circle. "Come to us, sister," they spoke. Van Helsing held out a cross and they disappeared. "I must destroy them," he thought. When morning came, he left Mina in the center of the circle and walked to the castle. There he found 3 coffins. He opened the first one and saw a beautiful woman with blonde hair. He cut off her head. Her body immediately turned into dust. He repeated the same action with the other 2 vampires. Before Van Helsing left, he drew a cross on the gate. Dracula will never enter his castle again, he thought. He returned to Mina and was glad to see that she was unhurt. "My husband is coming," she told him. They went east through the snowy mountains. It was nearly evening. Suddenly they stopped and hid behind a huge rock. Van Helsing shouted, "Look!" They saw a group of people on a narrow mountain road. Horses pulled a carriage toward the castle. On the carriage was a large wooden box. Behind them, Mina could see the figures of Dr. Seward and Quincy. 2 more riders came close to them from the north. They were Arthur and Jonathan. "The sun is going down," Van Helsing said. "God help us." The riders came up to the carriage, and Jonathan shouted, "Stop!" The men held guns in their hands. Van Helsing appeared from behind the rock and prepared to shoot as well. They fought hard for a long time. Finally, Dracula's servants lost the fight and ran away. Jonathan and Quincy climbed onto the carriage. The Count lay in his box. His eyes burned. The moment the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Jonathan cut his neck with a knife. Quincy's knife went through the Count's heart. Dracula let out a terrible shout. His body turned into dust. He was dead. Suddenly, Mina noticed that Quincy held his hand tight to his stomach, and blood ran through his fingers. He fell on the snow. "God, one is so happy to feel the love of one's friends," he said. With these words, he closed his eyes and died. 7 years later, the Harker family traveled to Transylvania. They had a son named Quincy. Van Helsing was with them too. "All we have left of our adventures are diary notes," he said. "But we don't need people to believe us. One day, your son will know how brave his mother is.
For more English books for all levels, check out appava.com. And now, watch this video to improve your English right now.